Could it be that this perpetual warfare is merely a symptom of a much larger disease? A disease that necessitates war, division, and destruction to function. My next guest asserts that this is indeed the case. In fact, has created 3 mind-blowing documentary films that everyone should see that explore the ideological trappings that prevent us from seeing this obvious truth. It's a philosophy that spawned the global Zeitgeist movement, which just saw its 5th annual conference last weekend, which drew hundreds of thousands of people in 45 different countries around the world who share a common goal. So, to talk to me about society's systemic problems and the solutions to them, I'm joined now by Peter Joseph, director of the Zeitgeist film trilogy and the founder of the Zeitgeist movement. Peter, thank you so much for coming on.
It's my pleasure, Abby. Thank you for having me.
So as we know, it's the 10th anniversary of the Iraq War. In your latest edition of Culture in Decline, you speak about war as a symptom of a disease, and until we address the symptom, wars will always exist. What is the disease, and why does it necessitate perpetual war?
The disease is our refusal as a global civilization to very fundamentally share our resources, compounded by this fear generation that's perpetual, which is driven by imperialism, which is no mystery if anyone studied basic history. But the economic system is where all of this resides. And the problem isn't that the intelligent people out there aren't aware of this, it's that no effort is being made to actually go to this root cause and make a decision to put pressure on all the establishments of the world to begin to work together. And the real danger, ultimately, is that we're no longer a closed society. If say, India and Pakistan decided to go to nuclear war for basic ideological or resource reasons, in fact, that would affect everybody on the planet. So this is now a public issue across the entire world. We have to grow up and become mature, learn to share our resources, and until the economic model is addressed, which perpetuates scarcity, which perpetuates competition, which uses empirical tools such as war to expand this empire, no different than a corporation expands a monopoly, we have a long and dangerous road ahead of us.
Indeed, it is a global system, and humanity is on a road of collective consciousness in terms of the internet and the advancement of technology. It seems like the system's hinged on dogmatism and institutionalized fear in order to maintain it. In your films, you point out 3 main factors. I mean, religion, politics, economics. But the technology is advancing to the point where these paradigms simply don't apply to the collective consciousness, which we just spoke about. So what is reinforcing this, and how come more people can't act toward coming outside of this outdated system, Peter?
Well, the conditioning is so powerful. I mean, everything that rewards you and I, or the basic majority of the population, which is this industrial economic system where you have to be very cutthroat, extends itself synergistically to the entire approach of how nations interact, of how the world interacts. So if you have a complete model based on competition, fear generation, again, the restriction of possibility through scarcity, and this kind of ideological fervor that says, well, this is just the way it has to be, and they have no idea what technologically can happen to remove all poverty, to actually eliminate all the problems that are generating this incentive for war. Since people don't know about those things, which of course is what the Zeitgeist movement is trying our best to get out there apart from other ideas, they don't know how to think about it. So they look at this, us and them, they say this is just the way it is, and the entire sickness unfolds. And the fear, as you point out, is just cyclically regenerated over and over again.
But Peter, we're told that capitalism breeds competition and innovation, and nothing else will allow that to exist. Yet your documentary perfectly outlines, I mean, these amazing technologies that exist right now, yet they're being restricted or underdeveloped because of monopoly over industry. I mean, for example, the maglev train. I mean, it's mind-blowing what the potential of this is. Talk about this as well as other innovations that could completely transform society for the better.
Yeah, it's unfortunate how people, again, don't know of these innovations. From infrastructure such as transportation to food generation to energy generation, we have the capacity to create an abundance of these things of high efficiency, incredible sustainability, with, in fact, none of the scarcity attributes and labor requirements and these value orientations of traditional economics, which could make them all free, in fact. And I mean that very literally, and if people want to learn more about that, thezeitgeistmovement.com. But here's the problem. There's 2 systems happening in the world right now. There's a financial system, a market system, the business system, and then there's a natural law scientific system that existed long before we ever evolved to understand it. And we are putting a round peg in a square hole right now, because the evolution of technology is enabling all these possibilities to literally solve mass, multi-millennia global problems, to put on a completely new path towards true progress and creating social stability and increasing public health, but we are being blocked and stopped by this arcane market system, the free market capitalist system as it exists in its form today, which needs to restrict efficiency. It needs inefficiency to keep people employed and to keep this whole hideous machine going.
Right. I love that part in your documentary also where you talk about products. I mean, they're made to be have a shelf life of like a year, so then you just keep buying the updated model, and we don't share things anymore. I mean, and of course, humanity has potential for so much good, yet so many of the smartest people on Earth are working for methods of destruction and warfare. I mean, you've said yourself a revolution of values is what's required. What impetus is needed for this shift?
Good question. You know, there's what we call a biosocial set of pressures, which are, you know, the basic destabilization we see socially, the Occupy uprisings, which is just one of many historical uprisings of the underclass that is basically abused and exploited. We see tremendous biodiversity problems and ecological problems that are emerging across the world. You know, it's climate destabilization, all this stuff that is persisted that we kind of conveniently ignore. But these pressures, once they come down, once this natural law philosophy, this natural law science that we live in immutably shows us that, okay, I'm not going to let you do this anymore, we can hope that we will adjust and adapt. Sadly, as in my last Culture in Decline, it was called War Against Nature, there's really a war against nature happening with all the established systems in the world. We're refusing to acknowledge the basic foundation of our sociological propensities, meaning our public health propensities, how our brains interact with the environment, how we generate crime, how we generate violence, how we generate, of course, war on the social level and on the personal level. We're creating social neuroses and distortion across the board because we're not respecting these natural issues. So you can look at it from the standpoint of the human organism, and you can look at it standpoint from our larger macro institutions that literally have no respect for the environment because it's not within the business model. The business model has no acknowledgement of the natural law philosophy that we have to subscribe to in order to maintain sustainability.
Which, of course, perpetuates this distortion of values of also just what true happiness and success is. I mean, I know firsthand living in D.C., it's all about what job you have, how much power that job yields, and how much money you make from it. How does this toxic way of thinking about success inhibit true happiness, true stability, true health from actually manifesting?
Again, that's a great question. People need to sit back. Everyone needs to personally stand back at some point in their life and ask them what it is that they actually wanted to do when they were a kid growing up before these pressures of the systems emerged, pressure of the system emerged to get a job and to be, you know, this edifice of exchange, which is what we're all reduced to. And ask themselves what happiness really means. Is it material success? Clearly not statistically. Material success is variable. You could go back hundreds of years, and there be people with much better public health than we have today, societies, and yet they have much less of a material acquisitive reality. They don't have all the cell phones and Twitter and all this stuff that distracts us and makes us feel impulsive with how we relate to the world around us in many different ways. But yet they're happier. You can go to smaller impoverished cultures today that live off the land, still so much happier statistically. There's measures that have been done. Yet we are the wealthiest, most materialistic society, and we have the highest levels of suicide, depression, drug use. It goes across the board. So it's a personal respect issue, plus it's also a statistical issue. And that's another thing that the movement tries to get out is like, well, if we have this whole society that claims to be the pinnacle of success in the material culture, why isn't it correlating to our personal sense of satisfaction? And that's a big question that I could go on a huge tangent on, but I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, well, people should definitely check out all of your series, Culture in Decline. It's great. Let's talk about the 5th annual Z-Day and the solutions that were discussed. How can we move forward in implementing this new social order without getting trapped in the barriers of language and these divisions, these box paradigms of socialism, Marxism? I mean, it really prevents people from opening their mind to enveloping aspects of this in our society that we need to address.
Right. Yeah, the polarization propaganda goes back to our history books. Everyone, you know, if you're not into a competitive society, you must be into a communist society, excuse me, it's unfortunate that still persists because it blocks people's frame of reference, both the people that state those things and the people that hear it and don't know any better. That's a hard argument. The best thing to do is to go after the train of thought. And that's what the movement tries to do and what our event on Z-Day was all about. The main event in Los Angeles, which was sold out, we had a tremendously good response, and we had about 11 speakers across 6 hours just go step by step through what this transition of thought and this transition of society could be. The transition of thought comes to realizing that we're just one big family on this planet. We're one species. We come from basic biological ancestors, one, in fact, mitochondrial Eve. So we're all literally one big family. And we have to realize our economy is one system on the Earth. Therefore, these structural attributes that we've concocted in the market economy, these divisions, sovereignty, we have to begin to question these and question their validity for long-term social sustainability. And to answer your final question about actual transition, that's a difficult subject, how to actually move into a completely new approach to this. But there's one thing I'll say, and it's a phrase, it's called starving the beast, and that's a lack of participation in the current model.
Right.
There are many different ways that people can engage, especially now with this sort of access society that's emerged very slowly. You see this in Europe with the sharing of bicycles and things like this. You have other examples in the corporate commercial realm, such as the zip car in America, stuff like that. Primitive notions of this. But localization of energy in your homes, the community attributes, sharing of resources, creating shared networks, time banks, mutual credit systems like they have in Switzerland. Very advanced systems that do one thing. They help people that are suffering, that can't get a job, which is growing and robust across the world. And simultaneously, it takes away the energy and drive, the GDP growth. So you imagine, for example, if we had resolution to healthcare problems in America, which is about 15% of GDP. Right. This is a side note, by the way. And you actually resolved health problems instead of fueling them like they do.
Unfortunately, Peter, I'm so sorry. We're out of time, and there's so much more to talk about. Everyone check out your series. Peter Joseph, definitely making the system irrelevant is the first step. Filmmaker of the Zeitgeist trilogy and founder of the Zeitgeist movement. Awesome to have you on.
Thank you very much.